Hey guys, here's a third video in a series I've done today. If you want to quickly automate some of the standard adjustments that you make to an image, but you don't necessarily want it to be a custom adjustment that is only applicable to a specific image, you can kind of think your way through it and you can create a series of action buttons that are universally applicable to an image. Let me give you an example. Let's say I tell it I want to create a new action, and we're going to call this curve up by 5. Okay? So now I'm recording my action, and I go image adjustment curves, and I come to the middle spot, I push it up by, about 5 points. And I tell it okay, and I stop that action. So then I tell it I want to create another one. We're going to call this one curve down by 5. Okay? And we're going to image adjustment curves, and I'm going to pull it down about 5. I tell it okay, and I stop recording. So then let's say I do a third one just to give you the idea. Let's say I create one, and I'm going to call it increase saturation. Tell it to record. I go image adjustment, hue and saturation, and let's say I turn saturation up by 5 points, and I tell it okay, and I stop it. I like to view my action palette in what's called button mode because it just creates these buttons. And so you'll see I've got a bunch of things I've saved over time, but under the user presets, here's my curve up by 5, here's my curve down by 5, and here's my increase saturation. So if I open this image, straight out of camera, and I decide I want it brighter, I can just click curve up by 5. Now, of course, if you make it a small increment, I can click it 2 or 3 times and curve it up. Since I clicked it 4 times, I've actually curved it up by 20 points. Or I can click curve down multiple times, and it'll bring it down. But that, to me, is a lot quicker, faster, and easier than going up to image, adjustment curves, grabbing the slider, moving it. I just push the button. So then, same thing. If I want to increase the saturation of this image, I just click the button. And because I've done it a small amount, it's fine-tunable. So I can click it 2 or 3 times until I really get the amount of saturation that I want. And of course, you can make buttons for anything that you can do in Photoshop. As an operation, you can create an action that'll do that. So, for example, if I tell it, create a new action, and I want to make a black and white, action that does something like duplicate the image, image adjustment, gradient map, and let's say I want to apply a custom gradient, play with that, and maybe I want the shadows a little darker. Okay, so I've created this gradient map to make a black and white image, and maybe as part of that I want to go in and tighten up the levels a little bit, and maybe open the midtones a hair. I tell it okay, and now I stop. I now have a black and white adjustment of this image. But tomorrow I can open a completely different image, and because I saved that as an action, here's my black and white action button. With one click, I get my black and white image. Now, it not only works with all of the image adjustment, all these tools, you can also record an action to apply it as, all of the different adjustment layers, which of course means you can hit it to apply it and then go back, for example, if you wanted to make some adjustments to it. So I could go to make a new action, and I'm going to call this black and white via adjustment layer. If I could spell it. So I hit record. So this time I'm going to come over here while I'm recording and tell it to do the black and white adjustment layer version. And let's say I start by increasing the reds and pulling some yellows and pulling some greens and boosting the blues or something like that. And now I tell it to stop. Okay. And I like to view mine in button mode. So I'm going to get rid of this adjustment layer. So now that I've recorded that as an action, I can open an image tomorrow, and here's my black and white via adjustment layer. With one click, I get that same adjustment. But because I did it as an adjustment layer, if I come over here and double click, it should open my adjustment. Edit the adjustment. Oh, you know what? It's underneath my action button. So here, when I clicked over here, it opens this. I'm going to turn this off so you can see it again. That's what I set it to the day before or whatever. So then if I decide it needs a little tweaking, I can do my tweaking. Now, when I did it, I didn't tell it to merge this down, because I always like to have the ability, if I open a completely different image, I want to be able to go back and maybe make some quick adjustments. But if you find that you're doing common things, two images over and over again manually, you can save yourself time, energy, and effort by turning that into an action. So for example, I routinely work on full-size images, and then when I'm done, I want to make them a good size that shows up on Facebook. So I can create a new action, and we're going to call this web size at 2400. I tell it to record. Now, if I was trying to adjust this image to web size, I'd go image, image size, and I downloaded it from the web because it showed up on my feed. But I normally set an image to 2400 on the long side, and then sometimes I apply some sharpening. At about 75%, tell it okay. Now I stop my action from playing, turn it back to button mode, right? So now if I open a completely different image, like this one, if I want to make that web sized with the sharpening, here's my web at 2400. I just click one time, and now it's a 2400 pixel image. And if I decide I want to curve it up by 5, I just click it. And maybe I want to increase the saturation, I just click it a couple times. And if I want to make it black and white, I just click my black and white. Hope that makes sense. Save things as actions that you do on a repetitive basis. Here's one. I think it still works. I don't know if I've saved the background folder. Yeah, this was called Open the Shadows. And I normally and obviously give them names that help me remember what they are. This one says exposure bump. That makes my image a little bit brighter. There you go.